Have you ever trusted someone only to realize later they were never the person you believed they were? And then you found yourself asking one simple question: how did I not see it? Because once it's over, everything suddenly makes sense. The conversations, the excuses, the little moments that didn't quite feel right, the things you brushed off because they seemed too small to matter. Looking back, the signs seem painfully obvious. So why didn't they feel obvious at the time? Why do so many intelligent people end up trusting the wrong person? Was the other person simply that good at pretending? Or is there something about the way we decide who to trust that most of us never question? The uncomfortable truth is, we don't build trust from evidence. We build it from first impressions. And once those first impressions settle in, they quietly shape everything that comes after. By the end of this video, you'll understand why that happens, why some people earn your trust far faster than they deserve, and how to stop making the same mistake again. Chapter 1. Where trust really begins. Let's try a simple experiment. Think about the last person you met for the very first time. Maybe it happened at work. Maybe a friend introduced you. Maybe you met online. Now ask yourself something. How long did it take before you thought, I like this person? 30 seconds? A minute? Maybe even less. Now ask yourself a different question. What did you actually know about them? Not what you felt. What did you actually know? Probably almost nothing. You didn't know how they handled disappointment. You didn't know how they treated people who couldn't help them. You didn't know whether they kept their promises. You didn't know who they became when nobody else was watching. And yet, your opinion was already forming. Not because you were careless, because that's how human judgment works. When information is missing, your mind naturally fills in the blanks. Imagine two people walking into the same room. The first person is confident, well-spoken, comfortable. They seem to know exactly what to say. The second person is quieter. They pause before answering. They seem a little nervous. Now be honest. Who would you trust first? For most people, the answer is the confident one. Not because confidence proves character, because confidence feels convincing. And that's where the first trap begins. Confidence isn't honesty. Confidence isn't kindness. Confidence isn't integrity. They're completely different qualities, but our minds often treat them as if they're the same. Psychologists call this the halo effect. When we notice one positive quality, we quietly assume there are many more. Someone is charming, so they must be trustworthy. Someone is attractive, so they must be genuine. Someone is successful, so they must be a good person. But those aren't facts. They're assumptions. Memorable line. The most dangerous people aren't always the best liars. Sometimes, they're simply the easiest people to believe. Think about someone who eventually disappointed you. Looking back, did you ignore something that bothered you simply because there were so many things you liked about them? Maybe they were funny. Maybe they made you feel important. Maybe they seemed incredibly confident. So every uncomfortable moment became, I'm probably overthinking. They didn't mean it. It's not a big deal. Notice what happened. The warning signs never disappeared. You simply stopped treating them like warning signs. And that's what makes this psychological pattern so dangerous. It doesn't force you to trust the wrong person. It quietly changes what you choose to notice. But here's what's even more surprising. Most people don't lose trust because they miss one huge warning sign. They lose it after ignoring dozens of small ones. So why do we keep explaining away behavior that we'd immediately question? If it came from someone else, that's where the second psychological trap begins. And almost everyone has experienced it without ever realizing it. And unlike the first one, this one doesn't decide who you trust. It decides how long you keep trusting them. Think back to someone you once trusted, not the day everything fell apart. Go back a little further, to the first moment. Something didn't feel quite right. Maybe they broke a small promise. Maybe they avoided a simple question. Maybe their words didn't quite match their actions. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that made you walk away. Just a small moment. Easy to ignore. Easy to explain. Easy to forget. Now ask yourself something. What did you tell yourself? I'm probably overthinking. Everyone has bad days. They're not usually like this. It's only happened once. Sound familiar? Most people don't ignore warning signs because they don't see them. They ignore them because they've already decided who they believe that person is. Imagine someone you've known for years. Someone who's always been supportive, always been kind. Then one day, they lie to you. What's your first reaction? Do you immediately think, maybe they've been lying this whole time? Probably not. You search for another explanation. Maybe they're under a lot of stress. Maybe they didn't want to hurt me. This doesn't feel like them. Now imagine a complete stranger tells you that exact same lie. Would you defend them the same way? Probably not. Same lie, same words, different judgment. So what changed? Not the behavior, your belief. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. Once we believe someone is trustworthy, Our minds naturally notice everything that supports that belief. And when something doesn't fit, we don't always question the person. Sometimes we question the evidence instead, not because we're irrational, because changing our opinion means admitting something uncomfortable. Maybe I was wrong about them. And that's a difficult thigh for anyone to accept. Think about buying an expensive car. A week later, someone tells you it was a terrible choice. What do most people do? They don't immediately agree. They defend the decision. They remember all the reasons they bought it. They ignore the criticism. Not because the car is perfect, because they've already invested in believing it was the right choice. Relationships often work the same way. The more time, the more trust, the more emotion we invest in someone, the harder it becomes to see them objectively. Memorable line. People rarely get hurt because they miss the first red flag. They get hurt because they spend too long convincing themselves that it wasn't one. Looking back, almost everyone says the same thing. The signs were always there. But that's rarely the real problem. The real problem is we keep waiting for one big reason to stop trusting someone, while life quietly gives us dozens of small ones. But there's one final psychological trap, and it's the most powerful one of all, because it has nothing to do with how charming someone is or how confident they seem. It has everything to do with what your life is missing the moment they walk into it. And once you understand that, you'll understand why even intelligent people can trust the wrong person. So what is the final psychological trap? Ironically, it has the least to do with the other person and the most to do with you. Not your intelligence, not your experience, but the emotional state you're in when that person enters your life. Think about the moments when you trusted someone the fastest. Were those the moments when everything in your life felt stable? Probably not. Maybe you had just gone through a breakup. Maybe you had moved to a new city. Maybe you felt lonely. Maybe life simply felt overwhelming. And then someone came along. They listened. They remembered little things about you. They made you feel understood. And for the first time in a long while, you felt seen. Now ask yourself something. Were you trusting that person? Or were you trusting the feeling they gave you? Because those are two very different things. One of the biggest mistakes we make is confusing emotional relief with emotional safety. Just because someone makes you feel better doesn't automatically mean they're good for you. And just because someone understands your pain doesn't mean they've earned your trust. Sometimes they've simply discovered what you've been missing. Memorable line. The wrong people don't always earn your trust. Sometimes they simply arrive when you're most willing to give it away. This doesn't mean you should become suspicious of everyone. That's not the lesson. The lesson is slow trust down. Not because everyone is dangerous, but because character takes time to reveal itself. Anyone can be kind for one afternoon. Anyone can say the right words. Anyone can make a great first impression. Consistency is much harder to fake. So how do you protect yourself? Not by learning to read minds, not by becoming cynical, but by asking better questions. Instead of asking, how do they make me feel? Ask, what have they consistently done? Instead of asking, do I like this person? Ask, what evidence do I actually have that they're trustworthy? Because trust should never be built on one conversation, one apology, or one promise. It should be built on patterns. Here's something worth remembering. Watch how people behave when they don't need anything from you. Watch how they treat people who have nothing to offer them. Watch what they do when keeping their word becomes inconvenient, because that's where character quietly reveals itself, not in perfect moments, but in ordinary ones. Final memorable line. People tell you who they are every single day. The question is, are you listening to their words or are you watching their patterns? Ending. Maybe the biggest mistake isn't trusting the wrong people. Maybe the biggest mistake is believing that trust is something you give once. Real trust isn't built by charm or confidence or chemistry. It's built one honest action at a time, one kept promise at a time, one consistent choice at a time. So the next time someone enters your life, don't ask yourself, can I trust this person? Ask yourself, have they consistently given me a reason to? Because the people who truly deserve your trust will never ask you to stop paying attention. They'll earn your trust without asking for it.